The urgency of the seacoast, let's talk about it because here we are, came about because in 1960, Hurricane Donna, I think, hit every state up and down the East Coast. Some people here remember that. There were 365 dead here, a terrible loss of life. But remember, and some of us may not, in 1938 was the kind of hurricane that hit especially New England. I think it's called the New England hurricane. And that had 800 dead, mostly in Rhode Island. And there were whole islands, like I think Napatee Island had 40 houses. The whole place just, in effect, disappeared. Part of New Jersey, Cliffwood, or whatever the particular Cliff Beach, that disappeared. So in response, there were certain kinds of development plans worked out. And we will now look at 3 of them in New England, because after 1938 there was worry, but then after 1960 it was rushed. So in 3 states there on the coastline, here's the first one in Rhode Island, in Providence, there were barriers built to protect the inland areas against the sea surge and against the flooding. Now this is the Fox Point Barrier in the bay there at Providence. It was started in 1960 and finished in 66. And it's about 3,000 feet long, and it worked fine since, many times. Let's go to the next one. Nearby in New Bedford, Massachusetts, this is a scene of a longer barrier, and it has a huge stone structure. It's still to this day the largest stone structure on the East Coast, built by the Army Corps of Engineers. This gate can close, there's a gate in between there, in 12 minutes. That's nice. That Providence run can close in a half hour, so in case nobody needs to be asleep at the switch, you can still work it out. The next one is an aerial shot. Isn't that a nice barrier? That's Stamford, Connecticut. That's a hurricane barrier. That's the third one that's also built in the 1960s. Now, so you see there was response. I showed you the artifacts of the intention 60 years ago and some of the physical construction. What I'd like to do is we have reason here, don't we, to stay on the question of the sea, and let's look at the situation internationally. Because there's reason why the Netherlands stands out. Excuse me for being pedantic. It means low lands, doesn't it? It's the lowland, and the reason I want to go there is that what happened is the North Sea it's nothing like the Atlantic Ocean, but things come together. Certain kind of annual tides, windstorms, as well as, so you can get a tremendous sea surge. Scotland, Eastern England, Norway, but Belgium, Holland, and this has happened periodically there. It even goes all the way east into Russia, what used to be Leningrad, St. Petersburg. And so one of these, I want to show you here, because one of these storms hit tremendously in 1953. That was before Hurricane Donna. But you know, it was so bad. It's called I think in Holland, the Great Storm. And on February 1st, in a few weeks, it's still commemorated, because Holland lost 1,850 people. Altogether, there were 300 or 400 or more in East England. This thing just inundated the place, and it was slammed. Now, what was decided at the time, and we'll get to this, there you see the North Sea, okay? You got your orientation here. And this is basically the delta. These complicated inlet areas are from, over here the Rhine rises and comes down. That's what it is. It's the Rhine River and related runoff, the Maas, others going out to the North Sea. So over the centuries, the Dutch have been famous for reclaiming land. You can see it in Rembrandt etchings, beautiful landscapes of a high berm and then surrounding a dry lake, a polder, I think it's called. And so there was a patchwork of protection, but when the 1953 Great Storm hit, it was all washed away. So what was decided is to form the Delta Works. Here it is, Delta Werken. You can look at deltawerken.com. I invite you to do so. And an entire coherent system was decided. Do you see these? And the dates are given. Let's not study it. It's the principle involved. Instead of trying to protect inland with little round dry lakes with berms and levees and stick your finger in the dike, instead there was a decision made, go out to the perimeter and see what kind of protective barriers you need to build. Here's one, here's one, here's one. And then see, you may need some secondary ones, because if you build at the perimeter, then you don't have to have all these inner ones because they'll be flooded anyway. So that's the principle. It's relatively simple. Between 1958 and 1997, in other words, about 40 years, the whole thing was built. And many of the internal lower dikes, levees, and systems could be removed, and you'd have more land for tulips or industry or whatever you wanted to do. So let's look at the next one, at the next slide. We won't study this, but in fact, this on closer study is an example. The names here refer to some of the things you could remove because you built perimeter protection out here towards the sea, and you could remove some internal levees. You didn't have to keep them up. Go to the next one, please, and you see one of the most famous aspects, because this is Rotterdam. This is one of the world's leading ports. You have to be able to get in and out. Here is a beautiful set of radial pivoting gates, and they're open, and you see the barge going right along. So most of the time it's beautiful. The gates are open. They have many other kinds of gates. You can have gates that drop. You can have rocker gates. You can have different kinds of things. Go to the next one, please. And here's when the gates are closed. There is an irony here. Let's not dwell on it. Holland also then put up all of these wind mills, wind turbines for electricity, because I spoke of the winds in the North Sea. So this has been used in subsequent decades. Let's ignore that for now. We have a lot of ironies, I'm afraid. So I want to now, so this is a tremendously successful system. I'll say right now, we're going to put some of the relevant specifics, that is how long, 9 miles in length, this barrier is, and so soon make it available to Diane Sayre's campaign and have it postable everywhere and have it circulate. I know there's one structural engineer here. He may want to comment. This is just the beginning. This has to be on the agenda. Before we leave the North Sea, though, it's worthwhile, I can say more about it later, to go east towards Russia. And what you'll see there is St. Petersburg is also low. I think they call it the Venice of the North, because it's built on the marshes of the Neva River centuries ago, and then it was really built up in the 1700s. And it gets slammed, but it has been getting slammed. So here it is. This is under construction. What happened in around 1978, the Soviet Union, see this barrier? Here it is. It's under construction, 1978, and then finished around 2009 or 10. They built miles and miles. It might be a 10-mile-long barrier. I'm not sure the length of this. With these kinds of gates, here's some of those rocker gates under construction to allow the shipping into St. Petersburg and out into the Gulf of Finland. And the Bay of Neva is, I'm not sure which way we're looking at it, but that's the nature of this. So it too took 35 or more years, and various Western construction companies helped finish it off. And so this is the reality. Staying there too, go to the next one, please. I want you to see even the Thames, which doesn't even rank on size. I presume it's bigger than the Passaic River, but I can't say. But to protect the city of London from these ferocious surges, they put in this system. It was finished. It was finished in the late 1980s. It goes all across the Thames, downriver. Here is a diagram of how it works. These are rocker arms, and in between these rocker arms are kind of half barrels, and you can put them down and keep the sea out, and the rest of the time, they're flat under the water. Let's go to the next one. You'll see the real thing. This isn't a diagram. This is this, and there are gates, and the entire Thames River can be blockaded there. It's a barrage. It's been in effect. Maybe some of you have seen it. But now there are not innumerable things like this around the world. One is being completed in Venice for obvious reasons in the Adriatic. That's not like the Atlantic or the North Sea, but they get a combination of rainfall and heightened. So they have a kind of flap, a gate flap. It's underwater, it lies flat, and then it's pushed up with a strut. And that will work there for them. They're not deep sea. They're not like your Atlantic Ocean up here. And that's underway. So many places in the world do not have this. You read of what happens in Indonesia, in what's happened in Bangladesh, but this shows the reality of what's built and what works. Now let's look at a very interesting thing. I just wanted to point out a place that has a different set of problems than Hoboken or Staten Island or Tokyo with 12.5 million people. We can go to the next slide. This is an underground holding tank because, after all, the archipelago of Japan are mountains underwater. And if you get rainfall in a deluge coming down on top of you, at the same time you get a tsunami or just a surge, where do you put the water? You can't. So they have built the biggest set of holding tanks underground in the world. They popularly call it the underground temple. Look at the next one. And tourists can see it for free. And it's gigantic. It's on the perimeter of Tokyo. It has a fancy name about the Tokyo Water Diversion Outer Program. But basically, they have big collection for the sea coming in, the deluge coming off the slopes towards the city. It's all collected in these gigantic football-size holding tanks, and then they have gigantic pumps to pump it out when it's safe to do so, and they know where they want to pump it. So this is normal engineering reality that was built over the last 40 or 50 years, despite the antagonistic environment to this. So what I want to do is come back here to, by the way, that took about 14 years to build. They have a lifespan, but they do, but it's intended and it's accomplished. So what's happened in North America? We probably wouldn't be here if everything was built. We'd be, saying goodbye to friends going to Mars or to, the moon in the tunnels. But I just want to point out, I just want to go to say something about the time period in which this tremendous shift was foisted on our country, thanks to us being susceptible to it. And the projects we already defined in the 1940s and 50s were completely thwarted, the necessary projects. Because, remember, President Kennedy was killed in 1963. He was for looking ahead for 50 years and building necessary projects and going to the moon. You had echelons of scientists and engineers at the Atomic Energy Commission all over the place, but they were thwarted. And what happened is, you had the Vietnam War, of course, just to review briefly, but around that late 60s, 70 period, you had a ferocious intervention of the kind of Earth Day, don't mess with Mother Nature, do not go into the environment and build defenses and deal with increasing water supply, moving it to where you need it, prevent it from where it shouldn't be, as in sea surges. You had the National Environmental Protection Act passed. In 1995, you see, right there, they developed what they called SLOSH to analyze what places in New York City, New Jersey, and elsewhere would be put underwater in the case of 100 or worse years. They call, a century flood. And for example, this is New York City. I don't have New Jersey. It's gettable. We'll get it. It goes together. They knew this was 1995 to 1999. They knew 14 subway stations in the case of surge would go. They knew 18 rail stations, Hoboken and all the other ones. They knew what would happen to the tunnels and the bridges getting potentially hit. The critical miles of roadways, 2 airports, ferry landings, 6 fire stations, public schools and private schools. They had more than 1 hospital we can get to. Nursing homes, 10 power plants, a sewage treatment plant, and the city of New York knew which public housing complexes were on the floodplain and would have flood prone. So we know that. And I'm only putting this here because switch this around, because this wasn't acted on. This was 95 to 2009, and we know what ought to be acted on. I mean, we knew it because what happened here in the last, in October 29th. But in any case, what happened is, in 2009, a seminar was held, and Diane herself in the campaign has a new book. It just came out a month ago, Storm Surge Barriers to Protect New York City. It includes New Jersey. against the deluge by the American Society of Civil Engineers, and it gives the proceedings of papers presented in 2009 here of people who came from St. Petersburg, Holland, and homegrown, especially at SUNY, to discuss what we're going to do. Now, they have 3 proposals on that perimeter principle, and we'll now look at the overview. They would say, basically everyone says, one thing is obvious. You have the Verrazzano Narrows where the bridge is, put a barrier there. Here into New Jersey on Arthur Kill, between Staten Island, New Jersey, where you have the other bridge beside Gothel's, I forget what it's called. Put a barrier there. Up here you have a problem. It's not a river, but the Long Island Sound can funnel in the way that funneled into. So put a barrier on the East River, like this inner side of Throg's Neck, okay? Put a barrier. And they all discussed the substratum of the dirt, what did the whole thing look like, what are the problems, and now let's look at their designs. This is an artist's rendering of how you would have, this is those radial gates like they have in Holland and they have in St. Petersburg. Here's the Verrazzano Narrows Bridge, and here is right next to it. You would have a barrier, and you'd be able to protect, what's this called, the inner harbor, or the inner harbor, from the sea surge. Here's another view of it, closer up the next slide. There's the sea, and you could shut those the way you've seen them shut near Rotterdam when you have to do it. So these are the engineers. Arcadis worked on Rotterdam, and they worked on New Orleans. Now, the next one is just, we're going quickly because this, I'm not sure exactly how this works. This is for Arthur Kill. This is between New Jersey and Staten Island. New Jersey might be here, I'm not. But they have, they had a certain, some of these have tunnels involved, bridges involved, but underground. I can't say exactly how this is designed, but they have many designs for it. And we'll go to the third one for the East River because likewise, you can picture a barrier. You've now seen about 10 of them. But they propose to use the kind of thing here that they're doing for Venice. It lies, this is the barrier, the gate, when it's closed. This is the coming in from the Sound, Long Island Sound. And over here is to protect the city. And a cylinder comes up and keeps that barrier. And otherwise, the gate lies flat on the bottom. So that's the idea for the East River. And finally, we have the grand idea from the company that's associated with it's called Halcrow, but it's with one of the big companies, CH2M Hill. They say, don't just do the Verrazzano Narrows and Arthur Kill. Go outer, build 5 miles at least, I don't know what this is, between the Rockaways and Sandy Hook here. And there's a way to do it. You can build a barrier. You can still protect your shipping lane from the Ambrose Channel. You can have your Sandy Hook Channel. And that company is ready to talk Turkey. They want to. They met in 2009. And that would be an outer barrier in this way. So the point is, the same principle here is protect the perimeter.